I was sitting at table 5, adjusting my dress jacket like I had done hundreds of times with my uniform, only this time I wasn't in combat boots or briefing soldiers. I was just Diane Brooks, retired Army major, trying to survive the circus my sister called a wedding. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, waiters glided around like they were trained at West Point for food service, and the jazz band played something so smooth it almost made you forget how fake half the smiles in that ballroom were. Across the room, my younger brother Michael, dressed in his Navy suit, looked like a man finally trying to pretend his life was back together. He was getting married again, this time to a woman named Vanessa Coleman, who smiled so perfectly for the cameras that you'd think her teeth were sponsored. I watched him laugh with a group of cousins, raising his champagne like the past never happened. But I knew better. His first wife, Caroline, had died in a car accident 3 years ago, leaving him with their son, my nephew Caleb. Nothing about this wedding felt like joy. It felt like a bandage on a wound that hadn't healed. Next to me, Caleb sat in his tiny bow tie, legs swinging from the chair. He was only 7, but he carried more weight in his small frame than most adults could handle. His mom was gone, his dad was marrying someone new, and his allergies could land him in the ER from a single bite of the wrong food. He had his toy car with him, a bright red one, and he pushed it along the white tablecloth like the entire wedding didn't exist. That kid could tune out the world better than any soldier I ever knew. Joanna, my adopted daughter, leaned over from the other side of Caleb and teased him quietly. She was 20, strong-willed, and had the kind of protective streak that made her perfect around kids. Caleb trusted her like a big sister. Between the two of us, he had at least a fighting chance to feel safe in a room where I already smelled trouble. And then, trouble arrived in the form of my older sister, Patricia Patty, to everyone else, but never to me. She floated around the room like the self-appointed queen of the evening. She hugged Michael, kissed Vanessa on the cheek, and shook hands with relatives she hadn't spoken to in years. From the outside, she looked like the proud big sister supporting her brother's new marriage, but when her eyes flicked toward me, I saw it. That cold flicker of resentment she'd been perfecting since we were kids. I was the soldier with the medals. She was the one who thought she deserved the spotlight. And now, she had it at least for tonight. I took a sip of water, because someone had to stay sober in this room, and glanced at the plates being set down on the tables. Shrimp cocktails, neatly arranged with lemon wedges. The smell alone was enough to put me on edge. Caleb couldn't be anywhere near shellfish. Every single person in this family knew that. I told the caterer myself, twice. Still, there they were, pink and glistening like a loaded gun left on the table. I moved Caleb's plate aside and gave him a piece of bread instead. He looked up at me with those wide eyes, silently thanking me. That's when I felt his little hand wrap around mine. His grip was tight, tighter than a child's hand should be. His fingers were ice cold. "Aunt Diane," he whispered, voice trembling, "we need to leave. Right now." I leaned down, keeping my voice calm. "What's wrong, buddy?" He shook his head, his whole body stiff. "You didn't look under the table, did you?" For a moment, the music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, they all faded. Just his words, sharp and shaky, hung in the air. My training kicked in. I lifted the white tablecloth slowly, scanning the darkness under the table like it was a bunker in Kandahar. At first, just the chair legs and Caleb's polished shoes swinging nervously. Then I saw it. A folded piece of paper, small, square, almost invisible against the carpet. My stomach tightened. I reached down and picked it up. Caleb squeezed my arm so hard I could feel his fear vibrating through him. I unfolded the note with steady hands, the way I once opened orders that could send soldiers into fire. The handwriting was rushed, slanted, but clear enough under the dim candlelight. Table 5, add shrimp to the child's serving. I felt my pulse slam against my throat. The words didn't just suggest carelessness. They were an instruction, a targeted, deliberate move. Someone in this room wanted Caleb to eat shrimp. Someone wanted him to have an allergic reaction on his own father's wedding day. I shoved the paper into my jacket pocket before anyone else could see. Caleb's eyes begged me for reassurance. I squeezed his hand back, forcing a calm expression. "It's okay," I told him, though nothing about this was okay. The waiter set down another tray at a nearby table. I scanned his face, memorizing his features like I used to memorize enemy profiles. He looked normal enough, but the note had to come from somewhere, Notes don't just crawl under tables on their own. I looked up toward the head table. Vanessa was posing for pictures, glass raised high, laughing with her friends. Perfect dress, perfect hair, perfect act. Too perfect. Patty was close by, whispering to a relative, flashing her smile like a politician on campaign night. Her eyes darted around the room, skipping over me, but I caught the split-second glance at Caleb. It wasn't warm, it wasn't sisterly, it was sharp, calculated. I kept my face straight, because if I learned one thing in the army, it's that you don't tip your hand before you're ready. But inside, I knew. Someone had put Caleb on the menu, literally. And if I didn't figure it out fast, this wedding was about to become a crime scene. Caleb leaned against me, his little car clutched in his other hand, whispering again. Don't let them, Aunt Diane. 1. I brushed his hair back gently, my voice steady. I won't. I promise. The band played louder, people cheered as Michael raised his glass to thank everyone, and the photographer's flash kept popping like fireworks. To anyone watching, it was just another wedding. But under the surface, at table 5, I held the kind of evidence that could tear this entire family apart, and I wasn't about to let anyone know I had it yet. My hand tightened over the folded note in my pocket as the room swirled with laughter and clinking glasses, but in my chest, the familiar chill of combat settled in. It wasn't bullets flying overhead, but the feeling was the same, eyes scanning, muscles tense, every sense sharpened for threat. For a split second, I almost wished I was back in uniform, because at least in war you know who the enemy is. The smell of the shrimp cocktails still lingered, and I pushed Caleb's plate even farther away, sliding him a roll instead. He chewed quietly, his toy car balanced beside his fork, pretending everything was fine. That kid had learned early how to keep his head down when things felt dangerous. I rubbed his shoulder and caught Joanna watching me. She didn't need words. The girl read situations fast. She had that same sharp instinct I used to rely on in the field. And suddenly I was back there, halfway across the world, the sound of helicopters chopping overhead, the sand scratching in my teeth. I remembered the day Corporal Harris didn't come back. We trusted someone on the inside, a local interpreter who swore he was loyal. We let him carry a message. Turned out that message led my unit straight into an ambush. Harris took a bullet that should have been mine. I still see his face when I close my eyes. That lesson that betrayal can come wrapped in trust was burned into me. I blinked and the ballroom snapped back into focus. The polished floors, the roses on every table, the perfect smile plastered on my sister's face. And now, here I was again, with another piece of paper that could destroy someone I loved. My heart pounded so hard I thought Caleb might hear it. I leaned closer to him and forced a steady breath. He looked up, eyes wide and scared but trusting. He always trusted me. When Caroline died, Michael nearly fell apart. He buried himself in work, late nights at the firm, early mornings before Caleb woke up. It was me who took the boy to his doctor's appointments, sat with him through fevers, argued with schools to make sure they kept shrimp off their cafeteria menus. Caleb learned early that if he needed someone, it wasn't his dad, it was me. And he clung to me because I never left, not once. I remembered one night years ago, when Caleb was just 3. He spiked such a high fever his body shook in my arms. I held him on my couch, pressing cold cloths to his forehead while Caroline sobbed beside me. She whispered, "What if he doesn't make it?" I told her, "He's tough. He's ours. He'll make it." And he did. The fever broke by morning, and Caroline kissed my hands like I'd saved her son. Maybe I did. Maybe I just got lucky. But I knew from then on I'd never let anything happen to him. Now here he was, 7 years old, whispering to me in a ballroom full of people dressed to impress, and I realized nothing had changed. My mission was still to keep him alive. Michael finally made his way to our table, grinning like he didn't see the storm brewing. He bent down to hug Caleb and smoothed his bow tie. "You doing okay, champ?" he asked. Caleb just nodded and clutched his toy car tighter. Michael turned to me. "He's quiet tonight. Guess he's shy around all these people." And to part. I wanted to shake him. Shy? The kid was trembling because someone tried to poison him at your wedding, you idiot. But I bit my tongue. Losing my temper here would help no one. I forced a smile. "He's fine, just a little overwhelmed." Michael kissed Vanessa on the cheek when she walked over, and I caught her shooting me a quick glance before turning back to the photographer. She leaned into my brother like she'd been his wife for 20 years already. I could almost hear her rehearsed lines about blending families and new beginnings. But Caleb wasn't smiling. He shrank behind me, as if her presence alone made him want to disappear. I shifted in my chair, the edge of the note pressing into my ribs like a knife. My instincts screamed that the danger wasn't random. Shrimp doesn't appear on a kid's plate by mistake when the entire family knows he's allergic. This wasn't coincidence. It was deliberate. And I couldn't ignore the fact that Patty had been circling Caleb like a hawk all evening, her fake laugh just a little too loud, her hands clapping just a little too slow whenever Michael and Vanessa kissed. I thought about growing up with Patty. She was always the one who had to win, who had to be noticed. When I joined the army, she called me crazy, told me I'd end up broken or forgotten. When I came back decorated, she rolled her eyes like the medals didn't mean a thing. She hated that people listened to me, trusted me. And now, with Caroline gone and Michael's new marriage putting money and inheritance on the line, Patty had every reason to see Caleb as an obstacle. Caleb shifted closer, pressing into my side. His small voice broke through my thoughts. "Aunt Diane, don't let go of me." I rested my arm around him and nodded. "Not a chance, buddy." That. The band started another song, couples moved to the dance floor, and waiters brought out plates of steak and roasted vegetables. I checked Caleb's plate again, scanning every bite like it was a landmine. He looked at me, waiting for my nod before he'd picked up his fork. He knew the drill. He trusted me to keep him safe. Joanna leaned over, her eyes on Caleb's pale face. "You want me to sit closer?" she whispered. I shook my head. "Stay where you are. Just keep an eye." She nodded, her jaw tight. That girl had fire. As laughter rose around us, I forced myself to breathe evenly, to blend in, to look like just another guest. But inside, the war was already on. Someone here had written that note. Someone here wanted to watch Caleb choke on shrimp while the champagne kept flowing. And as far as I was concerned, they had just declared battle against me. Caleb pushed the roll around on his plate, silent, while I scanned the room as if I were back on patrol. The laughter, the music, the sparkle of crystal chandeliers, it all looked polished from the outside, but polish never fooled me. A room like this was full of cracks, and if you looked closely enough, you saw them. My eyes landed on Patty, moving from table to table with her wine glass like a politician working a fundraiser. She hugged an uncle she barely called at Christmas, then leaned into a cousin she hadn't seen in a decade. Every time she laughed, her head tilted back just a little too far, her voice just a little too loud. It wasn't joy, it was performance. When she finally made her way near us, she leaned on my chair, flashing that wide smile. "Diane," she said sweetly, "you actually came. I thought the army would have shipped you overseas again by now, or maybe you just didn't have anything better to do tonight." I met her smile with one of my own, practiced and sharp. "Well, Patty, I figured someone had to keep this circus safe. Who better than me?" Her eyes flickered. For a split second, the smile dropped, and I saw what was behind it. Resentment, pure and simple. She hated that I was there, hated that Caleb sat under my arm like I was his real shield. She smoothed her dress, straightened up, and turned that fake warmth on Joanna instead. "And Joanna, looking more like your mother every day. You're such a good girl, always tagging along after Diane. Must be exhausting playing soldier's shadow." Joanna raised her chin. "At least I know how to stand on my own feet." The kid didn't flinch, not even under Patty's glare. I had to bite back a grin. Patty moved on, but the taste she left behind was bitter. Across the room, Vanessa twirled in her gown while her bridesmaids snapped pictures. She had the kind of beauty that didn't need filters, but somehow still looked fake, too rehearsed, too polished. She touched Michael's arm, whispered something in his ear, and laughed like she'd just won the lottery. Maybe she had. She was marrying into a family with money, with a grieving man desperate for a fresh start. But when her eyes slid toward our table, her laughter froze for half a second. She looked at Caleb, then at me, then quickly turned back with another dazzling smile. Caleb caught it too. He pressed closer against me and muttered, "I don't like her." His voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear. I stroked his hair and whispered back, "You don't have to." The waiters passed again, laying down fresh dishes. I checked Caleb's plate first thing, scanning it like I was reading coordinates. No shrimp this time, just steak and mashed potatoes. I cut a small piece and tasted it before handing him a fork. He took it without a word, but his eyes never left Vanessa. Meanwhile, Michael walked from table to table, glass raised, thanking everyone for coming. He looked proud, relieved even, as if he believed this night was proof his life was finally back on track. He stopped by our table, kissed Caleb's head, and clinked his glass with mine. "Everything good here?" "Perfect," I said, smiling just enough to make him move on. He didn't need to know the storm sitting in my pocket. Patty returned to the head table just in time to clap along as Vanessa's maid of honor gave a toast. I caught the way Patty's eyes narrowed when Caleb giggled at something Joanna whispered to him. It wasn't subtle. It was envy, raw and sharp. That boy represented everything. She wasn't part of Caroline's memory, Michael's devotion, the future inheritance Patty couldn't touch. The toast ended, the band started another song, and people rose to dance. Couples swayed, kids ran between tables, and for a moment the room looked normal again. But I didn't miss the glances, the tiny slips in their masks. Patty's smile cracked whenever she thought no one was watching. Vanessa's laugh tightened when her gaze drifted our way. Caleb whispered, "Why do they keep looking at us?" "Because they know we see them," I said softly, cutting another piece of steak for him. Joanna leaned in, her voice low. "It's not just me, right? Patty's acting like she's the bride." "She's acting like she owns the place," I replied. "And she doesn't." The music swelled, and Patty stood up to dance with Michael, spinning like she was auditioning for center stage. Vanessa clapped along, sipping her wine, eyes shining as cameras flashed. To anyone else, it looked like a family celebrating. But I knew better. The smiles were too perfect, too polished. They weren't celebrating. They were hiding. I tapped my pocket again, feeling the sharp crease of the folded note. My instincts told me the threat wasn't gone. It was right here in the room, dressed in silk and sequins, smiling for the crowd. And as I watched Patty twirl across the floor, I realized she wasn't just here to celebrate Michael's wedding. She was here to make sure the family story ended exactly how she wanted. The band kept the dance floor alive, but my focus stayed on Caleb. He was quiet, nibbling on bread, his toy car resting in front of him like a safety shield. I brushed my hand over his shoulder, steady, while my mind lined up every strange incident from the past few months like pieces on a chessboard. Tonight wasn't the first time something felt wrong. Tonight was just the first time I had proof. A few weeks earlier, I'd gone through Caleb's backpack after school and found his EpiPen case nearly empty. At first I thought maybe he'd misplaced one, but when I checked closely, the injector inside was a fake plastic casing. No needle, no medication. Somebody had switched it. I'd ripped through the house looking for the real one, finally finding it buried at the back of a kitchen drawer. Michael swore he hadn't touched it. Caleb said he never moved it. The only people who had been in that house were family. Then there was the night Caleb ended up in urgent care after a mistake in the kitchen. He'd been served soup with shellfish broth, something that should never have been in the house. Michael brushed it off as an accident, blaming a mislabeled container. But the label wasn't wrong. I checked. Someone had moved the containers around. And last month, when I tried to refill Caleb's prescription at the pharmacy, the system flagged his medical file as incomplete. His shrimp allergy had disappeared from his chart like it had never existed. The pharmacist thought it was a clerical error. I knew better. Medical records don't vanish without someone making them vanish. Each time, Michael told me I was overreacting. "Diane, you see battles everywhere because that's what you're used to." Maybe so. But you don't need to be a soldier to know when someone's setting traps. I glanced across the ballroom at Patty. She was sitting at the head table now, sipping wine, clapping at the band. Her smile widened every time a camera swung her way. But when she looked at Caleb, her lips tightened, her eyes cold. That wasn't a mistake. That was intent. Vanessa leaned toward her, whispering something, and they both laughed. Not the kind of laugh that came from a shared joke. It was the kind of laugh that said, "We know something you don't." I cut another piece of Caleb's steak, sliding it onto his fork. He took it without looking up, his small shoulders hunched. I leaned in, keeping my voice low. "You okay, buddy?" He nodded slowly, still chewing, then whispered, "They don't like me." "Who doesn't?" I asked. He glanced at the head table. "Them." I kept my tone calm. Doesn't matter what they like, you're safe with me. He pushed his toy car back and forth, avoiding my eyes. I recognized that silence. It was the silence of a kid carrying fear too heavy for his age. Joanna broke it by leaning in. I caught Vanessa staring again. She muttered, like she's watching every bite Caleb takes. I didn't answer. I already knew. The lights dimmed slightly, as waiters prepared for the cake cutting. Guests cheered. Some moved closer with their phones out. Michael beamed like this was the happiest day of his life. Vanessa smiled so wide I thought her face might crack. And Patty, always the star, managed to slide herself right into the frame of every photo. I stayed seated, Caleb pressed against my side. He whispered again, "Do we have to eat the cake?" I shook my head. "Not if you don't want to." The cake rolled out, 3 tiers of frosted perfection. Guests clapped, Vanessa laughed on cue, and Michael wrapped his arm around her waist. But I couldn't stop watching the waiters, the way one of them hesitated at our table before moving on. My hand slid over Caleb's plate again, protective, like a shield. Patty raised her glass to toast, her voice loud enough to echo. "To family," she declared, "the one thing we can always rely on." The crowd clapped, the band played softer, and for a moment she looked like the perfect sister. But I knew better. I heard the edge in her tone, the kind of edge you use when the word itself means the opposite. Caleb tugged my sleeve, eyes wide. "She's lying," he whispered. I squeezed his hand. "Yes, she is." End of chapter. As the crowd cheered again, I thought about all those missing puzzle pieces, the fake EpiPen, the tampered soup, the erased medical records, and realized they weren't separate accidents. They were steps. Careful, deliberate steps leading right here, to this night. Someone wasn't just careless. Someone had a plan. I pulled the folded note from my pocket and glanced at it again, making sure my eyes weren't playing tricks. Table 5, add shrimp to the child's serving. The words looked even uglier now, framed by memories of every warning I'd ignored. My sister was spinning in her gown, laughing at the center of the room, acting like the benevolent matriarch. But behind the show, I could see the truth. This wasn't family. This was theater. And Caleb was supposed to be the sacrifice. I waved down a young waiter carrying empty glasses, catching him off guard. His smile flickered when he noticed how serious my face was. I pulled the folded note from my jacket and pressed it into his hand under the table. "Tell me who gave you this," I said flatly. He looked at the paper, blinked, then swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I didn't read it. I just delivered it to the kitchen." "Not what I asked," I said, keeping my voice low. "Who handed it to you?" He shifted, eyes darting toward the dance floor like he hoped to vanish into the music. It was one of the guests. A younger girl, brunette, kind of nervous. She said she was with the bride's side. My gut tightened. Allison Coleman, Vanessa's kid sister. I'd seen her trailing Vanessa all evening, quiet, awkward, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. She couldn't have written that note, her hands shook, just holding a champagne flute, but someone could have used her. "Look at me," I told the waiter. He did. "Did she say anything?" He shook his head. "Just told me to make sure it got to the kitchen. I didn't think it was weird." End of 4. You didn't think giving a secret note about food to the kitchen staff during a wedding was weird? His face went pale. I thought it was like a request for the menu. I leaned back, forcing a thin smile so no one would notice us. "You ever see that girl before tonight?" "No, ma'am." I slipped the note back into my pocket and waved him off before his nerves gave us away. He scurried back toward the bar, looking like he wished he'd taken a different shift. Caleb's eyes followed him, then turned to me. "What did he say?" I stroked his hair. "That it wasn't his idea." Joanna frowned. "Whose?" I kept my gaze locked on the head table, where Allison now sat stiffly beside Vanessa, her hands clenched in her lap. "Someone told her to do it." The band started another upbeat tune, the kind meant to keep people smiling while their drinks disappeared. Patty clapped along, laughing with a cousin, while Vanessa whispered into Michael's ear. Neither of them glanced at Allison, but the girl looked like she wanted to disappear under her chair. Michael came by again, his cheeks flushed from champagne and attention. He grinned down at me. "Why aren't you dancing? You used to love music." "I was usually too busy working," I said, pushing Caleb's plate away a little farther. Michael chuckled, missing the point. "Relax, Diane. It's a wedding, not a battlefield." If only he knew. As he moved on, I caught Allison shifting in her chair, her face pale. She tried to sip her water, but her hand trembled. Vanessa noticed, frowning, and leaned in to whisper something sharp. Allison nodded quickly, her head down. It looked less like a sisterly chat and more like a commander dressing down a soldier. Joanna muttered, "She doesn't look like she belongs here." "She doesn't," I said. "She looks trapped." Caleb leaned against me, voice tiny. "Did she try to hurt me?" I shook my head. "I don't think so." But the truth was uglier. She might not have known what was in that note, but she'd carried it, and someone had counted on her being too timid to question it. Patty stood suddenly, raising her glass, and called out, "A toast to the bride and groom." The room cheered. Cameras flashed, and she basked in the glow like it was her own celebration. She praised Michael for finding love again, praised Vanessa for being the perfect addition to our family, and somehow managed to mention herself 3 times in a 30-second speech. Everyone clapped, except Caleb, who just pressed closer into my arm. His instincts were as sharp as mine. He knew something was wrong. I studied Patty as she soaked in the applause. Her eyes flickered again toward Caleb, and in that glance, all the sweetness vanished. Cold, calculating, hateful. It wasn't the look of a proud aunt. It was the look of someone who saw him as a problem to be solved. The waiter passed behind me again, moving fast, not daring to make eye contact. He wanted nothing to do with this anymore. Smart kid. Allison shifted once more, pulling at her dress, staring at the floor. She looked guilty. Too guilty for someone who thought she was delivering a harmless note. The question wasn't whether she knew she didn't. The question was, who told her to do it? And why tonight, of all nights, when every eye in the family was in this room? I tapped my fingers on the table, a habit I picked up in the service when I needed to focus. Each tap matched the pulse in my chest. Evidence was piling up, but I couldn't move yet. Not until I had more than a frightened waiter and a nervous girl. I leaned down to Caleb. "Stay close. Don't eat or drink anything unless it comes from me. Got it?" He nodded, clutching his toy car tighter. The crowd roared as the band shifted into another love song. Patty swept onto the dance floor with Michael, spinning like it was her show. Vanessa smiled, but her eyes never softened. Allison stayed seated, fidgeting with her napkin until it tore in her hands. From where I sat, I could see the cracks spreading wider. Patty was hiding behind her spotlight. Vanessa was playing her part like a polished actress. And Allison, poor Allison, was the pawn who'd carried a note she never understood. And that note was still burning in my pocket, heavier than any metal I'd ever worn. Patty was still twirling on the dance floor, holding Michael's hand like she owned him, when the DJ shifted into a slow ballad. She practically shoved Vanessa forward to take over, giving a dramatic little bow as if the entire crowd was there to see her. People clapped politely, but I noticed how her eyes scanned the room, soaking up every glance. It was her stage, not their wedding. I sipped my water and watched her carefully. Years in uniform taught me how to recognize when someone's wearing a mask. Patty's was flawless. Polished hair, flawless makeup, smile sharp enough to cut glass. But no matter how good the mask, there's always a slip. And tonight, her slip showed every time she looked at Caleb. During one of the toasts, while everyone laughed at a cousin's joke, I caught her face go still. Her gaze slid toward Caleb, narrowed, and lingered just a beat too long. It wasn't affectionate. It was cold, hostile, like he represented everything she despised. Then she caught me watching. She pasted on a grin, raised her glass toward me, and mouthed, "Family." I raised my own glass back, but my jaw tightened. "Family? My ass." Joanna leaned close, her voice low. "She's performing." End of 5. "Yeah," I muttered. "And not for the right audience." Patty took the microphone next, insisting on giving a special message. She gushed about how proud she was of Michael, how much Vanessa was the sister she never had, and how the Brooks family had always stood for unity. The crowd applauded, but I saw through every word. Her eyes flickered again, quick as lightning, right back to Caleb. That wasn't unity. That was hatred wrapped in sugar. When she stepped down, Vanessa hugged her. The two women smiled for the cameras, all teeth and gloss, but I noticed Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes either. It was a game of mirrors. Patty faking love for the family, Vanessa faking gratitude for Patty, both of them hiding something sharp under the shine. Caleb tugged my sleeve. Why does Aunt Patty keep looking at me like that? I brushed his hair back. Because she knows you're stronger than she'll ever be. He frowned. I'm just a kid. Exactly, I said. Allison stayed hunched in her seat, staring at her lap. She didn't clap during Patty's speech. She didn't smile for the cameras. Vanessa shot her a look sharp enough to draw blood, and Allison flinched. That girl was in over her head, and Patty knew it. The servers started bringing out the main dishes. My eyes never left Caleb's plate. Every dish looked clean, but I wasn't about to take chances. I motioned to Joanna. She switched Caleb's plate with hers before the server walked away, subtle enough no one noticed. Caleb looked confused, but Joanna gave him a wink and nudged her roll toward him. Patty noticed. Her brows lifted, just slightly. Then she looked away. But she'd seen it, and she didn't like that I was already a step ahead. Michael came around again, grinning like this was the happiest day of his life. Diane, come on. You haven't said a word all night. At least tell me you're happy for me. End quote. I forced a thin smile. I'm happy you're still breathing, Mike. Let's keep it that way. He laughed, assuming it was one of my usual military jokes. He never realized how close that line cut to the truth. The music swelled again, and the dance floor filled. Patty stayed near the front, clapping, laughing, making sure the photographer caught every angle of her dress. But then, while everyone's eyes were on the bride and groom, I caught her again. She looked toward Allison and made the smallest gesture, 2 fingers tapped against her wine glass, quick and sharp. Allison froze. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. My stomach turned. Orders. Patty was giving her orders right there in the middle of the wedding like no one would ever notice. Joanna leaned closer. You see that? Yeah, I whispered. She's running point. Allison pushed her chair back and slipped out toward the hallway, pale as a ghost. Vanessa didn't even look her way. Either she didn't care, or she was in on it. I stayed seated, steady. One wrong move and Patty would know I was onto her. But the pieces were aligning faster than I expected. Patty wasn't just jealous. She was orchestrating something, and Allison was her unwilling runner. Caleb pressed against me, his voice barely audible. Grandma, my stomach hurts. I froze. From what? I don't know. I didn't eat anything. I checked his plate. Clean. But fear had already dug in. The kid was terrified, and fear alone can make you sick. I pulled him close, kissed the top of his head, and whispered, You're safe. I've got you. Patty chose that moment to sweep back toward our table. Everything okay here? She asked, voice dripping with fake sweetness. I looked her dead in the eye. Just fine. You enjoy yourself? Oh, I am, she said, her smile too sharp. She bent toward Caleb. And you, sweetheart? Having fun? He buried his face into my arm, refusing to look at her. Patty straightened, her smile frozen, then glanced at me with that cold flash again. Shy little thing, she said before sauntering off. Joanna muttered, I don't like her. You're not supposed to, I replied. Across the room, Allison reappeared, wiping at her face, eyes red. She looked shaken. Vanessa pulled her aside, hissing something in her ear. Allison nodded quickly, then retreated back to her chair like a scolded child. Whatever Patty had ordered, it had rattled her, and rattled people make mistakes. I tapped my fingers again on the table, slow and deliberate. The room was still full of music and chatter, but I felt the storm brewing beneath it. Patty thought her act was airtight. Perfect speeches, flawless smiles, control over the moving pieces. But cracks were forming, and she couldn't patch them fast enough. Caleb shifted again, whispering, I don't want to be here anymore. I hugged him tighter. I know, but we're not leaving yet, because leaving meant letting Patty win. And I wasn't about to give her that satisfaction. Patty had barely walked away when I pulled the folded note from my pocket and slid it across the table toward Michael. Read it. He frowned, still half drunk on attention and champagne. What's this? Just read. Michael smoothed it open. His eyes skimmed the words, and the color drained from his face. His hand trembled slightly as he looked up at me. What the hell is this supposed to mean? It means, I said evenly, somebody here wanted Caleb's plate poisoned with shrimp. Michael's jaw dropped. That's insane. Who would? You tell me. Who benefits if Caleb ends up in the hospital, or worse? He shook his head violently. No, Diane, this is some kind of mistake. Maybe it was meant as a joke. A joke? My voice cut sharper than I intended, drawing a couple of curious glances from the nearby tables. I lowered it quickly. You think anybody in this family would find that funny? Michael folded the note and shoved it back across the table, as if he could erase it by touch alone. This is my wedding, Diane. Don't drag this nonsense into it. Nonsense, I hissed. Your son could have been killed. He rubbed his temples, breathing hard. I can't, no, not today. I can't deal with this right now. I leaned closer. Then when? After they bury him. His eyes flashed. For a second, the mask of the happy groom slipped, and I saw the broken man still mourning Caroline, but instead of facing it, he shoved the note into his pocket and stood abruptly. I don't know who's feeding you this garbage, but I'm not listening. He walked away before I could say another word. Caleb's little fingers tightened around my sleeve. Grandma? I forced a smile for him. It's okay, sweetheart. Eat your bread. Inside, though, my chest burned. Michael wasn't going to help. He was too weak, too blinded by Vanessa's polished smile and Patty's manipulation. That meant it was up to me. Joanna glared after him. Coward. Not coward, I muttered, compromised. On the dance floor, Patty had slipped back into the spotlight, leading the crowd through another toast like she owned the hall. Vanessa stayed glued to her side, a polished mask of charm, while Allison sat stiff and silent, eyes glassy. I knew now that I'd be fighting this battle alone. And I was fine with that. I'd fought harder ones with less support. The music blasted again, some overplayed pop hit. The crowd surged onto the dance floor. Glasses clinked, laughter echoed, and for anyone not watching closely, it was the picture of a happy wedding. But my eyes stayed sharp, scanning every corner, every movement, every sideways glance. Patty's act was flawless, but her control wasn't. She laughed too loudly, clapped too hard, and when she thought no one was watching, her smile collapsed into a scowl. She was cracking. Allison, poor kid, couldn't even fake it anymore. She sat picking at her napkin, shoulders curled, lips pressed tight. At one point, Vanessa leaned over, whispering something sharp into her ear, and Allison nearly jumped out of her chair. She nodded furiously, eyes down, like a soldier obeying orders she didn't understand. I caught that exchange, and I knew. Allison was a pawn, scared, manipulated, but involved. And that meant she was key to unraveling this. But I couldn't just confront her, not yet. Not in the middle of the wedding, not with Patty watching every move. I needed more. Proof solid enough that no one could dismiss it as nonsense. Across the room, Michael threw back another drink, laughing at some uncle's joke. He glanced at me once, then looked away fast. Shame. He knew deep down something was wrong, but he'd rather drown it in champagne than face it. Joanna leaned closer, her voice low and steady. So what's the plan? Stay alert. Watch Allison. And whatever happens, don't let Caleb out of your sight. She nodded firmly. Caleb looked up at us both, sensing more than he understood. Kids always do. The servers cleared the plates and started bringing dessert. I tensed again, ready to intercept, but nothing strange appeared. Still, I kept my eyes locked on Caleb's portion until Joanna quietly switched it with hers again. Patty saw it. She smiled thinly, like she was daring me to say something. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I studied hair. Patty had always been jealous, always bitter about me leaving for the army, about Michael finding a wife who loved him, about not being the center of every room she walked into. But this was darker. This wasn't jealousy. This was calculated malice. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized Michael's money, his house, even his happiness weren't her real target. Caleb was. The last living tie to Caroline. The one piece Patty could never control. My chest tightened, but my mind stayed clear. If I was right, she'd push harder before the night was over. She'd want her plan to land, to crush me, to prove herself superior. And I'd be ready when she did. The crowd erupted again as Vanessa threw her bouquet. Cameras flashed, women laughed, and Patty clapped like she was proud of orchestrating the moment herself. Allison caught the bouquet. Of course she did. The poor girl looked horrified, clutching the flowers like they were evidence of a crime. Vanessa hugged her for the cameras, whispering something into her ear again. Allison nodded stiffly, her eyes darting toward me for a split second. That glance was all I needed. She knew. She knew who I was, what I suspected, and she was desperate for someone to notice. I held her gaze for half a heartbeat, just enough to let her know I'd seen her. Then she looked away, trembling, the bouquet crushed in her hands. Patty swooped in, beaming, wrapping her arms around Vanessa, then posing with Allison as though they were the perfect trio. The cameras clicked. But behind Patty's glossy smile, I caught the steel again. That wasn't joy, that was control. And the more she pushed it, the clearer it became that she was overplaying her hand. I took a slow breath, steadying my nerves. Every instinct I'd honed in uniform told me the battle was shifting. The enemy had exposed her strategy. All I needed now was to hit back at the right moment. But for now, I stayed seated, holding Caleb close, and let Patty believe she still had the upper hand. Because soon enough, the cracks in her act would split wide open and she'd be the one left exposed in front of everyone. The bouquet was still clutched in Allison's hands when I pushed my chair back and caught her eye again. She froze, bouquet petals trembling between her fingers, as if she already knew what I was about to say. I walked toward her slowly, steady, making sure no one else noticed the shift. The music and laughter covered me, but when I stopped in front of her, her shoulders stiffened. "Allison," I said quietly, "walk with me." Her eyes widened. For a moment she looked to Vanessa, who was laughing with Patty across the room. Then she nodded, almost imperceptibly, and followed me out into the hallway. The noise of the reception dulled once the door closed behind us. Allison stood there, bouquet limp in her hands, her chest rising and falling too fast. "I don't want trouble," she whispered. "Then tell me the truth." She bit her lip so hard it turned white. I didn't mean to do anything wrong, she just told me to." "Who?" My voice sharpened. Her eyes flicked toward the ballroom doors. "Patty. She gave me the paper. Said it was just a kitchen note. I didn't even look. I swear I didn't look." I held her gaze. "But you knew something was off." Tears welled up, and she nodded. "She scares me. Vanessa scares me too. I don't belong here. I thought I was helping my sister, but..." Her voice cracked. When I saw what it said, I wanted to run. I exhaled, forcing my own pulse to steady. Finally, confirmation. "Allison, you listen to me. You're not the one in trouble here. But if you stay quiet, Caleb's the one who pays the price. Do you understand?" She nodded frantically, clutching the bouquet like a lifeline. "I don't want him to get hurt. I didn't know. Please believe me." "I do," I said firmly. "But you're going to have to say it out loud when the time comes. Can you do that?" Her hands trembled. I think so." Before I could press further, the door swung open. Vanessa stood there, flawless smile plastered on her face, but her eyes burned with irritation. "What's going on out here?" Allison nearly jumped out of her shoes. "Nothing." I cut in before Vanessa could tighten the leash. "We were just getting some air." The girl looks pale. Vanessa's smile sharpened. "She's fine. Aren't you, Allison?" Allison swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes." "Duh." "Good," Vanessa said, sliding an arm around her sister's shoulders, with a grip that looked more like a shackle. "We wouldn't want to spoil the evening with any drama." She shot me a glance that said more than words could. "Stay out of my business." I smiled back thinly. "Enjoy your party." They disappeared back into the ballroom. Allison's eyes darted toward me one last time, pleading, before Vanessa steered her into the lights. When I returned to the table, Joanna's face was tight with concern. "Well?" "She confirmed it," I said quietly. Patty gave her the note. Joanna swore under her breath. Caleb leaned closer, whispering, "Does that mean Aunt Patty really wanted to hurt me?" I kissed the top of his head. It means she underestimated who she was dealing with. The rest of the guests had no clue. The dance floor was still crowded, cameras still flashing, glasses still raised. To them, this was just another wedding reception, full of smiles and champagne. But the storm under the surface was about to break. Patty spotted me across the room and raised her glass again, that same fake grin plastered on. Only now I saw the crack in her performance. Her eyes darted toward Allison, who sat stiffly in her chair beside Vanessa, bouquet crushed into a mangled heap in her lap. Vanessa leaned close to Patty, whispering something that made them both laugh too loudly. It was a laugh meant for show, not for joy. Michael came back to the table, looking uneasy. He hadn't touched his drink in a while. "Mom," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. "Vanessa says you're stirring things up. Just please don't ruin this for me." "Ruin it?" I pulled the note back out of my pocket and slammed it flat on the table. "You see this? That's what almost ruined it. That's what almost ruined your son's life." His face went pale again. He reached for the note, but I snatched it back before he could hide it away again. "You'd rather believe the woman in the designer dress than your own sister? Fine, but that boy is still your son, and if you can't protect him, I damn well will." Michael flinched, then turned and stormed off, muttering something about not doing this tonight. His back looked smaller somehow, weaker. Joanna snorted. "What a hero." I clenched the note in my fist. "Forget him. He'll come around when it's too late. My job's to keep Caleb breathing." The music dipped as the DJ announced the cake cutting. Everyone crowded around the massive tiered cake, cameras flashing again. Vanessa and Michael posed with the knife, Patty right beside them, smiling as if she were the true bride. I kept my eyes on Allison. She hovered at the edge, pale, bouquet crushed in one hand. When Vanessa caught her eye and snapped her fingers, Allison jumped forward, nearly dropping the flowers, and hurried to adjust the train of Vanessa's gown. Her face looked hollow. Patty clapped loudly, calling out another toast. Her voice rang across the hall. "To new beginnings and family unity." The guests cheered, but my stomach churned. Her words were a cover for venom, and she was daring me to contradict her. I didn't move. Not yet. Instead, I watched Caleb nibble cautiously on a piece of bread Joanna had slipped him. His toy car rested on the table, wheels scratched from years of use, and his clear eyes darted around the room, watchful in a way no 7-year-old should ever have to be. I wrapped my arm around him and pulled him closer. "You're safe," I whispered. He nodded, but his little hand tightened on mine like he wasn't sure. And as Patty raised her glass higher, basking in the attention, I knew the moment was coming when all of her perfect lies would collapse around her. The cheer from Patty's toast was still echoing when I stood up, pressing the crumpled note flat against the table. My chair scraped against the floor, loud enough to cut through the music. Heads turned. The DJ faltered with the next track. "Before anybody takes another bite," I said clearly, "we need to settle something." The entire room froze. Michael blinked at me from the head table, still holding the cake knife, his bride's hand in his. Vanessa's smile stiffened. Patty's glass stopped halfway to her lips. I raised the note. "This piece of paper was found under my grandson's chair. It says, and I'll read it so there's no confusion, Table 5, add shrimp to the child serving." A ripple went through the room, whispers spreading fast. Caleb pressed against my side, his small fingers trembling in mine. Joanna stood too, her chin high, ready to back me. I held the paper higher. "Most of you know Caleb has a severe allergy. Shrimp could kill him. Whoever wrote this note wasn't pulling a prank. They were trying to poison a 7-year-old boy." Gasps erupted. A cousin covered her mouth. The elderly couple from earlier shook their heads, horrified. Michael's voice cracked across the silence. "Mom, what the hell are you doing?" "What I should have done the second I found this," I snapped. "Protecting your son." Patty was the first to recover. She rose slowly, her smile syrupy sweet. "Diane, really, this is absurd. Probably a misunderstanding." I locked eyes with her. Then maybe the waiter who received it should clear things up. David, the young waiter, looked like a deer in headlights when I pointed to him. "Come here." He shuffled forward, pale, wiping his hands on his apron. "Yes, ma'am?" I handed him the note. "You recognize this?" He swallowed hard. "Yes. A guest gave it to me." "Which guest?" He shifted on his feet, eyes darting nervously. Then he pointed, trembling, toward Allison. "Her." The room erupted again. All eyes flew to the girl, who sat stiff and pale, bouquet crushed in her hands. Vanessa stood immediately, putting herself between Allison and the crowd. "This is insane. She's just a child." "She's 18, I cut in. "Old enough to know what she's carrying, and I happen to know she didn't write it." "Apridin." Allison's lips parted, her breath shallow. Tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't mean to." Patty swooped in, wrapping an arm around her. "She's overwhelmed. Leave her alone. Funny, I said flatly, because she told me out in the hallway that you gave her that note. Patty froze. For a split second, the mask slipped. Then she laughed loudly, forcing the crowd to hear it. Oh, Diane. Military service must have scrambled your brain. Why would I ever want to hurt Caleb? Why indeed, I said, stepping closer, my voice steel. Maybe because you've resented this boy from the day he was born. Maybe because Caroline's memory shines brighter in him than anything you'll ever be. And maybe because, with him gone, you'd have a cleaner path to Michael's estate. A stunned hush fell. Even the band stopped. Patty's smile shattered. That's a disgusting accusation. It's the truth, Allison blurted suddenly, her voice cracking. She told me to give it to the waiter. She said it was just instructions for the kitchen, but… Her tears spilled over. I didn't know it was about shrimp. I swear I didn't know. The ballroom exploded with chatter, voices rising, guests pointing. Vanessa tried to pull Allison back, but the girl wrenched free. I'm not covering for you anymore. Patty's face twisted, rage flashing in her eyes before she smoothed it back into something resembling calm. This is ridiculous. There's no proof. And check the security cameras, Joanna said coldly, arms crossed. They'll show you passing her the note. Every head turned toward Patty. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. Her silence was louder than any denial. Michael staggered forward, face pale. Patty, tell me this isn't true. She pasted on a brittle smile. Michael, darling, your sister is trying to ruin your wedding. She's jealous, bitter. No, he whispered, shaking his head. No, Patty, I saw you watching Caleb all night, cold, like you hated him. The crowd murmured louder. Relatives glared at her. One older uncle muttered, Unbelievable. To go after a child. Patty's composure finally cracked. Her voice rose shrill. Oh, what do you all know? That boy's not special. He's just a burden. Caroline's gone, and yet you all worship her ghost through him. What about me? What about what I deserve? The words spilled out, venomous, and there it was, the mask ripped off. Gasps echoed as people recoiled from her outburst. Even Vanessa stepped back, eyes wide, clearly not expecting Patty to unravel in front of everyone. I pulled Caleb closer, his face pressed into my side, and said firmly, You don't deserve a damn thing. Not love, not trust, and sure as hell not this family. The silence that followed was crushing. Everyone in the room saw Patty for who she really was. She stood trembling, chest heaving, then glanced around as though searching for allies. No one met her eye. She was finished, and she knew it. But in that charged silence, I didn't relax, because I knew people like Patty cornered. Desperate, they didn't go quietly. The ballroom felt like a vacuum after Patty's outburst. The music cut, the guests holding their breath. Even the clinking of glasses had stopped. She tried to smooth her hair and smile again, but it was useless. Her words were still hanging in the air, poisonous and unforgettable. I raised the crumpled note again. Everyone here heard her. You all saw her lose it. This wasn't paranoia. This was intent. My sister wanted to harm Caleb. Patty lunged forward. Lies. You don't have a shred of proof. Allison, I said, steady and loud. Tell them again. The girl trembled. Bouquet petals scattered at her feet. Her eyes darted to Vanessa, then to Patty, before locking onto me. It's true. Patty handed me the paper and told me to pass it to the waiter. I didn't read it until later. I swear I didn't know what it said. The room erupted again. Some people gasped. Others muttered in disgust. One guest shouted, Unbelievable! The young waiter David stepped forward, pale, but resolute. She's telling the truth. That's the girl who gave me the note. And she got it from Patty. I saw. Patty whipped around, eyes wild. You? You don't know what you saw? You're just a waiter. Funny thing about waiters, I said, my voice cutting through hers. They notice everything because they have no choice. And cameras notice more. I pointed toward the corner of the room where a discreet security camera blinked red. We can check the footage right now. No more hiding. The crowd turned toward the camera, murmuring, heads nodding. The weight of inevitability pressed down on Patty. Her face twisted. That's not necessary. This is a family matter. We don't need outsiders digging into… Outsiders, I barked. You tried to murder your own nephew, Patty. There's nothing family about that. The words hit like a hammer. She staggered back, her fake confidence collapsing. Michael finally stepped forward, shoulders slumped, face gray. He looked at Patty, then at me, then at Caleb, who clung to Joanna's side. His voice cracked. "Patty, tell me she's lying." Patty's lips parted, but nothing came out. The silence told the truth for her. Michael's chest rose and fell, his jaw tight. "I can't believe I defended you." His voice broke, and his hands trembled as he pointed at her. "Stay away from my son. You hear me? You don't come near him ever again." Vanessa finally snapped out of her daze. She moved to Michael's side, grabbing his arm. "Baby, don't listen to them. They're twisting everything." But Michael pulled away. His eyes finally saw what I'd seen all along. "No, Vanessa, the cameras will show everything. If you knew about this, if you were part of this." His voice faltered, but the implication was clear. Vanessa's perfect mask cracked. Her smile flickered, then fell, leaving her pale and stiff. Guests began pulling out phones, whispering, recording, pointing. Patty spun in a circle, desperate. "This is all a setup. Diane hates me. She's jealous because I'm the one who stayed behind, kept the family together while she was off playing soldier." I cut her off cold. "I didn't fight overseas just to come home and watch my sister poison a child. You want to call me jealous? Go ahead. But the only thing I envy is how shameless you are." The crowd roared with agreement. People shook their heads, muttering words like disgrace and sick. Allison's sobs grew louder. She dropped the ruined bouquet and clutched her arms like she was trying to hold herself together. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought it was harmless. Please believe me." I stepped to her, lowering my voice. "You told the truth when it mattered. That's what counts now." Patty's eyes narrowed at Allison, venomous. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything I've done for you." Vanessa tried to hush her, but it was too late. The guests had heard every word. The image of the gracious sister, the caring aunt, was gone. Patty wasn't the victim. She was the villain, exposed in front of the entire family. The DJ tried to restart the music, but no one moved to the dance floor. Instead, all eyes stayed locked on the spectacle unraveling at the center of the reception. The wedding had stopped being a celebration. It had become a courtroom, and Patty had convicted herself. Michael turned to me, his voice low and raw. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I shook my head. "Don't apologize to me. Apologize to your son." He looked over at Caleb, who hid behind Joanna's dress. Michael dropped to his knees in front of him, his hands trembling. "Caleb, buddy, I didn't listen. I didn't protect you. I should have, but I didn't. I'm sorry. I'll never let anything happen to you again." Caleb stared at him, confused, then hugged him tightly, small arms wrapping around his father's neck. Michael broke down, holding him close, tears streaming down his face. Patty scoffed, her voice shaking. "Oh, please, what a performance. You all think I'm the villain here? Diane's been poisoning you against me for years." "Enough," I snapped. My voice echoed off the walls hard as steel. "You're finished. Everyone heard you. Everyone saw you. There's no crawling out of this." Vanessa tugged at Michael's arm again, but he shook her off. Her lips pressed tight, fury flashing across her face. She might have thought she could ride this storm out, but Patty had already sunk them both. The crowd parted as the hotel manager entered, alerted by the chaos. He looked from the crushed bouquet to the note in my hand, then to Patty, who was shaking with rage. "Is there a problem here?" he asked carefully. "There's about to be," I said, handing him the note. "You've got security cameras, don't you? Time to review them." Patty's knees buckled slightly. For the first time that night, she looked scared, truly scared. And she had every reason to be. The hotel manager glanced at the note in his hand, then at Patty, who was trembling like a cornered animal. He didn't need convincing. Her wild eyes said everything. "We'll be pulling the security footage right away," he said, his voice firm. "Ma'am, I'll need you to come with me." Patty snapped her head toward him, shrieking, "Don't you dare touch me!" The room flinched. She slammed her glass down so hard the stem snapped, shards scattering across the floor. Guests gasped and pulled back as if the shards might cut them too. Michael rose slowly, still clutching Caleb's hand. "Patty, stop. Just stop." But Patty didn't stop. She turned on him, her face red, spittle at the corners of her mouth. You ungrateful little bastard. I gave up everything for this family while Diane ran around playing soldier, and what do I get? Nothing. Caroline dies, and suddenly, her brat becomes the saint of this family while I get shoved aside like trash. I know. The words echoed like gunfire in the ballroom. Every guest froze. Vanessa reached out to steady Patty, but Patty shoved her hand away so hard Vanessa stumbled back. Look at you, Patty sneered at Michael. So desperate for love you'll marry the first manipulative snake who bats her eyelashes. Do you think she really wants you? She wants your money, Michael. That's all you are to her, a walking bank account. Vanessa's face twisted. Don't you drag me down with you, she hissed. I never told you to touch that boy. The room gasped again. She clamped her mouth shut too late. Gotcha, Joanna said under her breath beside me. Michael staggered, looking between them both. You knew? Vanessa folded her arms, trying to hold on to her composure. I didn't know about shrimp. I just wanted him to behave. Patty blew it out of proportion. Patty laughed bitterly, a jagged, ugly sound. Oh, please. Don't pretend you weren't thrilled at the idea. One less obstacle between you and a fat inheritance. That was it. The thin veneer of celebration ripped apart. Guests began shouting. A cousin yelled, "Throw them out!" An older aunt burst into tears. The DJ turned off his equipment and slunk out, clearly unwilling to be part of this train wreck. Michael bent down to Caleb, voice breaking. Son, I'm so sorry. He hugged him so tightly Caleb whimpered, but he didn't pull away. Michael's body shook as he whispered again, I should have seen it. I should have known. I placed a hand on his shoulder. At least you see it now. Patty pointed a shaking finger at me. This is your fault. You've always hated me. Always tried to make me the villain. You did that yourself, I said coolly. All I did was open the curtain. 2 hotel security guards arrived, summoned by the commotion. They moved toward Patty cautiously. Ma'am, you'll need to step outside until this is resolved. Patty shrieked, backing up against a table. No, you don't get to throw me out of my own brother's wedding. Michael's face hardened. You're not my sister anymore. The room fell silent at his words. They landed heavier than any punch. Patty's knees buckled. Security stepped in and gently but firmly took her arms. She fought, clawing at the air, screaming incoherently. You'll regret this, all of you. Her voice cracked as they dragged her toward the exit, her heels scraping against the marble floor. Vanessa tried to slink away in the chaos, but a guest blocked her path. Not so fast. You've got questions to answer too. She stiffened, turning icy. I don't owe any of you an explanation. But Michael's voice stopped her cold. You owe it to me. You owe it to Caleb. Vanessa turned, her mask gone now. Her voice dripped with disdain. Fine. I never wanted to raise someone else's child, especially not hers. He's a constant reminder of Caroline. A constant reminder that I'll never be enough for you. Gasps filled the air. Michael flinched like she'd slapped him. Caleb pressed into my side, shaking. I stepped forward. And there it is, the truth. You weren't marrying Michael for love. You were marrying him to erase Caroline's memory and replace it with yourself. Caleb was never safe with you. The hotel manager frowned. Ma'am, you should leave too. Vanessa laughed bitterly. Gladly. She yanked off her wedding ring, flung it on the table, and stormed out the side door with her heels clacking against the tile. The sound faded into silence. The ballroom looked like a war zone, tables askew, guests shaken, the cake half sliced and abandoned. What should have been a celebration was rubble. Michael sank to his knees in front of Caleb again, sobbing openly. I failed you. I let them in. I let them hurt us. Caleb wiped his small hand across his father's wet face. It's okay, Dad. Grandma kept me safe. Michael looked up at me broken. I don't deserve him. Maybe not, I said softly. But he deserves you. Start proving it. He nodded, clutching Caleb like he was afraid to ever let go again. Guests began trickling out quietly, shaking their heads, muttering about the disgrace they'd just witnessed. The hotel manager apologized to me personally, promising the footage would be secured for the police. I thanked him and turned back to my family. Joanna wrapped an arm around Caleb, whispering gently to calm him. The boy finally exhaled, his small body sagging into her side. For the first time that night, I saw a flicker of peace cross his face. Patty was gone, Vanessa disgraced, the wedding in ruins. But Caleb was safe, and that was all that mattered. The ballroom emptied slowly, leaving behind half-eaten plates, champagne flutes tipped on their sides, and the heavy silence of a celebration that had died too soon. Caleb leaned into Joanna's lap, exhausted, clutching his toy car like it was the last safe thing in the world. I rubbed his back, steadying my own breath. My body still thrummed with the same vigilance I'd carried on deployment, but the threat had finally passed. Michael sat across from me, hunched forward, his face buried in his hands. His tuxedo jacket was wrinkled, his bow tie hanging loose, his shoulders heavy with shame. He hadn't spoken since Vanessa stormed out. The only sound from him had been the occasional sharp inhale when he tried and failed to keep from crying. I broke the silence first. He's still alive. That's what counts. Michael lifted his head, red-eyed, his face hollow. Because of you, not me. His voice cracked. I was so damn blind. I should have seen them for what they were. Patty, Vanessa. His throat worked as if the words were shards of glass. I almost lost him, Mom, my own son, because I wanted to believe in a lie. Ayman? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Wanting to believe doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. But refusing to see the truth when it's staring you in the face? That's when you lose everything. Michael nodded slowly, the weight of the night pressing down. He turned toward Caleb, who stirred in Joanna's arms. Michael's voice was gentler then, raw but clear. I'll never let anyone near him again unless I know they love him. No more masks, no more lies. N.W. Caleb's eyes fluttered open, and he blinked up at his father. Can we go home now, Dad? Michael broke, pulling him into his arms, kissing the top of his head. Yeah, buddy, we're going home. The ride back to the house was quiet. Joanna hummed softly in the back seat to keep Caleb calm while Michael drove in silence, his knuckles white against the wheel. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, my mind replaying every second of the night. The trap had been obvious, yet almost everyone had ignored it until the truth screamed too loud to be denied. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light flicked on automatically. Caleb yawned, dragging his toy car up the steps. Grandma, will you tuck me in? Of course, I said, following him to his room. Joanna stayed behind, helping Michael pick up the debris from earlier preparations for a wedding they'd never finish. I tucked the blankets around Caleb, smoothing his hair back as he clutched the car to his chest. His little voice was soft. Are the bad people gone? I kissed his forehead. Yes, sweetheart. They can't hurt you anymore. Promise? I held his hand tightly. I promise. He smiled faintly, eyes drifting shut. Within minutes, his breathing evened out. I stood there for a while longer, watching him sleep, letting the quiet wash away the chaos of the night. When I stepped back into the living room, Michael and Joanna were sitting together on the couch. Michael looked up at me, his eyes swollen but clearer than they had been all night. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted. Start small, I told him. Be there for your son. Show up every day. Stop running from your grief. Caroline's gone, but Caleb isn't. He needs a father, not a ghost. Michael's jaw tightened, but he nodded. You're right. He glanced at Joanna then, his voice quieter. And I owe you both more than I can ever repay. Joanna shifted uncomfortably, her cheeks coloring. You don't owe me anything. I love Caleb. That's enough. But I saw it the way her eyes softened when she looked at Michael, the way he looked back with a gratitude that carried something heavier underneath. It wasn't my place to interfere. Maybe one day they'd find their own path forward. For now, what mattered was that the boy asleep down the hall would wake up tomorrow to a safer world. I leaned back against the chair, finally letting myself breathe. The truth had been ugly, but it had set us free. Patty's jealousy, Vanessa's greed, they were exposed, stripped bare for everyone to see. They could scream, deny, or try to spin it. But the evidence, the witnesses, the cameras, none of that could be erased. Their downfall was sealed the second Caleb whispered to me under the table. For the first time in years, I felt something close to relief. Not joy too much had been broken for joy, but the quiet certainty that the fight had been worth it. Michael rubbed his face and looked at me. You always said honor wasn't just about wearing a uniform. I met his eyes. That's right. Honor is protecting the people who can't protect themselves, even if the enemy shares your last name. He swallowed hard, his voice low. Thank you for saving him, for saving me too. I shook my head. Don't thank me. Prove it. Be the father he deserves. I do. The clock ticked softly in the background as the house finally settled into peace. Joanna pulled a blanket over Caleb on the couch when he wandered in during the night, sleepwalking. Michael dozed in the chair across from him, his head bent, his hand resting near his son's. I stood by the window, staring out at the quiet street, and let myself believe for once that tomorrow might actually be better. The wedding was destroyed, the lies uncovered, the villains unmasked. But in the ruins, there was still something worth saving. A child's laughter waiting to return, a father trying to rebuild, and a family learning that survival sometimes comes not from blood, but from the courage to face betrayal head-on. When I finally turned away from the window, I whispered the truth that had carried me through every battle, at home and abroad. Real honor isn't medals or speeches. It's standing your ground when your family needs you most. Makes Fernie. And with that, I sat down beside Caleb and let the quiet of the night hold us together, safe at last. The night had left scars, but also a lesson that would never fade. My sister's lies had been dragged into the light, her hunger for control destroying the very thing she claimed to protect. The wedding was ashes, but Caleb was still here, sleeping safely with his toy car in hand. Michael had finally opened his eyes, and Joanna had proven her loyalty without question. For me, the soldier in uniform had retired long ago, but the fight for family had never ended. I realized then that revenge doesn't always come in violence, it comes in truth. And sometimes the hardest enemy to face is the one who shares your blood. When people talk about family revenge stories, they imagine betrayal and payback. But this was more than that. This was a story of survival, of cutting through lies, and of protecting what truly matters when no one else will. That's the kind of family drama you don't read about in fairy tales, but it's real. And it's the kind that reminds you, revenge isn't about getting even. It's about making sure the innocent never suffer again.